All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Sam Haymart, and today we're doing part one of a 10-part series called Surviving Anti-LGBT Politics. The episode today is about protecting yourself and your relationships legally from what might come. All right, everybody. What we're talking about today are ways that we can look at our lives, the makeup of who we are, who we're married to, who we might want to be married to. Are we a citizen or not? And where are we in that process? Do we have kids? All of the legal areas that we may want to have a really good look at. Make sure that we are screwed to the ground, our boards are on the windows, and we're protecting ourselves from that storm that's coming ashore. And so I put together a list of a few key areas just to sort of give some thought out there for each one of us to sort of look at. And the reason why is because the new incoming administration is backed up by a complete power structure. They've got the Supreme Court, they've got Congress, they've got the numbers to pretty much do whatever they want to do. And most people in the LGBTQ community believe that they're coming for us. We have heard what they want to do. We have read Project 2025. And well, a lot of people think, oh, well, Project 2025, that was just a talking point during the election. No, it is a real thing. You can read it. There's a link down below. It is being implemented right now as the new administration is putting their cabinet together and putting things in place. They intend to follow through with everything they can in that document. And there's a lot of scary things in there for us, people that aren't part of their mainstream coalition. So that said, I put together a list of a few things that we really all need to look at. And the first is same-sex marriage. Now, I'm married. My husband and I got married some time ago, and we're very fortunate that we have same-sex marriage rights in the United States today. And it's worth pointing out that it's a pretty new right. It was given to us in 2015. Obergefell and Hodges was a landmark case at the Supreme Court where it was ruled that the 14th Amendment grants us the ability to be married. Furthermore, in 2022, Congress and President Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which replaced some of the language that used to say marriage was between a man and a woman with more broad language that talks about individuals that were married legally. Now, those aren't the exact words, but you can look more into that. There's a link down below. As I always like to say, I like to back up what I'm talking about because I'm just sort of going on the cuff here. But that law codified essentially that Supreme Court decision. Now, there has been noise about overturning that decision since the fall of Roe v. Wade. One of the justices specifically in that Roe v. Wade decision talked about maybe we ought to revisit Obergefell and Hodges. Now, the likelihood that that's going to happen quickly is pretty low. There has to be a case before the court that would allow them to strike it down. At this moment, there's nothing in the system that is aiming for that. But rest assured, conservative groups will be finding cases to throw up the line to try to knock that down now that they have what they believe is the wind at their backs, and they've got a Supreme Court that'll probably do what, well, not what we want them to do, right? So that is a concern, a long-term concern, but some of the short-term concerns when it comes to same-sex marriages are things like a directive right from the White House desk. An executive order, whether it's constitutional or not, could chip away at our same-sex marriage rights, or at least throw gum in the works in making it difficult for us to actually try that. And that's something that could be a little bit more immediate. It would probably be challenged in court. Whether it would stand or not, who knows? But there would be a process that would take place over a period of time that during that process, it could become very difficult for us to actually have marriages. The bigger worry that I have is that with Congress and all of the like-minded people there, Project 2025, a president who will sign it, actually coming up with a new bill that overturns the Respect for Marriage Act, either parts of it or completely goes the opposite direction and tries to put it back to marriage being between a man and a woman. Now, these seem far-fetched, but so did the fall of Roe v. Wade just a few years back. That seemed pretty far-fetched. Nobody really believed that would ever happen. So don't take this for granted. The point is, if you're considering getting married, if you've already got that on your plan book, maybe you're engaged already, maybe you really love someone and you've been talking about it, it might be a good idea to consider doing it sooner rather than later. Do it sooner rather than later. Don't wait, because we never know where we're going to be in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or a couple of years around this right that we currently have. Once you're married, well, then you're married. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult for them to undo what's already been done. So that's the first thing. But on the same topic, and it's kind of I don't like to talk about this, if you're thinking about getting divorced, you might consider doing it sooner rather than later. And that's just a fact. A lot of people in the conservative realm have been wanting to reverse what has been no-fault divorce policies for almost half a century, where for the most part, one person in a marriage can initiate a divorce and with process enable a way to get that done if it's contested or one of the other parties in the divorce is just, making it difficult. And it's more of a state level thing. It's unlikely that on the national level, no-fault divorce would just be wiped out. But if they were to start chipping away at those rights at the state level, there would be places where it could take longer, it could cost more, it could be more difficult, and in some cases almost nearly impossible to complete a divorce if one of the parties was really fighting it. So depending on your situation, I'm not suggesting all y'all go out there and get divorced. Nobody wants that. If you get married, you did it for a reason. But if maybe you've been separated for quite some time already and you just never got around to getting that done, you might think about getting that done. Next up, if you're planning on getting any kind of new gender-affirming care, whether it's some kind of a medical procedure or whether it's going on a program of some kind, you might consider doing it sooner rather than later. And that's because a number of states are already chipping away at the abilities and rights of people to engage in gender-affirming care, whether it be through government programs or whether it be through private. Sometimes it's just the right to do it at all that some of these states would like to get rid of. And in some cases, they've already been successful at undoing some of what we would consider a right. So if this is something that's on your radar screen, educate yourself, get some good advice, and maybe look at ways to sort of move that ball forward a little sooner than you might have otherwise considered, because it is possible that a year from now, 2 years from now, things could be put into place or taken away that make it impossible or very difficult. Next on the list is medical care. It's very important for you to know where you stand with any government programs that you happen to be taking advantage of. Maybe they're private programs, maybe it's simply your health care program that you have through your work. A lot of these things can be affected by policy. They can be affected by rules that talk about your eligibility, and conservative powers have typically, historically, been all about chipping away at the effectiveness and the availability of a lot of these social programs that make it easier for people who can't afford the care they need to be able to get access to it. It's not my opinion, it's historically what they're about. Now that this new administration's in place, now that we have a new Congress in place that are all aligned, it's very likely that they're going to be starting to chip away and try to eliminate and to cut and to do all sorts of little policy changes and tweaks that can change your eligibility for a lot of the things that you might currently be hooked up with. And so it's very important for you to know where you're at in that structure of things, where you stand right now, and keep an eye on those eligibility and on those policy and on those areas that could affect your well-being and your availability to get care. Now, this is a topic that's just as important whether there's a good or a bad government in Washington, or whether we're married or not, whether we're even straight or gay. And that is, you want to make sure that you have your legal affairs in order around trusts, wills, powers of attorney, and things like that. If anything were to ever happen to you, and you don't have a natural heir like a spouse or children, what is going to happen to all of your stuff, your estate? All of the things that you value and would want some input into where that goes and who it goes to and who takes care of certain things. It's very important, especially for those of us in the LGBT community, to make sure that we have a procession in place, a will, a trust, a power of attorney at the very least, to make sure that there's somebody there who has the power to make decisions for us if for some reason we cannot, health decisions, life and death decisions, things like that, that meet our wishes. And that's because a lot of us aren't married traditionally, and if we just have a live-in lover, a boyfriend, maybe we've been with them 20 years, that person may not necessarily have the right to make the calls, to make the decisions, and to make the legal movements necessary if something were to happen to you and you become incapacitated. And this has to do also with children. If one of you has children and you're a couple, maybe you're not married, maybe you are, all of these things. And so wills, trusts, estates, powers of attorney, these are all things that the LGBT plus community doesn't necessarily always look at and think about, but they're very important, more important than for the standard heteronormative communities out there. And on that same wavelength, the next item on the list is children and legal adoption. Now, there are many same-sex couples out there who have children, or maybe you're a single parent with a child. These are all areas that changing policy, changing laws, shifting winds in Washington with what's going on right now could affect your parental rights in some way, shape, or form that you don't even know about yet. And so it's very important that if you have on your radar screen to make sure that you have parental rights over a child that's in your life, whether you're a guardian, their natural parent, or maybe through marriage, very important for you to look at that and make sure that there is a structure in place that determines your rights and you know what they're going to be. Because, again, something happens to you or your spouse, your partner, any number of people in your life, and there's a child involved, you want to make sure that and it's not even about you and your control over the matter, it's about their well-being and whose wishes are going to be applying to how that child is taken and directed going forward. And sometimes with a lot of us in the LGBT community who don't necessarily have good relationships with their families, it's important to make sure that you and the person and the child that's involved have a directive around how you want things to be if things change. Very important. Now, last but certainly not least, and this is actually quite important, is that you need to act right now and not next week, not the week after. But if you are someone who is not entirely documented in this country, meaning that maybe you're just undocumented altogether, perhaps you do have papers, maybe you are in DACA, maybe you have a visa, maybe you have some other program that you're a part of or that you're in some level of the process in, make sure that you've got all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed. Make sure your process is moving along. Make sure that you're somewhere on the right side of it. And that's because this administration has said from the outset, and it's been their past practice, along now with a Congress that is 100% behind them and a Project 2025 that is staffing the government, it's going to be a tough few years. Sorry. It's going to be a tough few years for all of you. And it just breaks my heart. It's going to be a scary time not knowing if they're going to come and knock on the door and take you away. And so it's very important for you to make sure that there's no loose ends relative to your status, relative to a visa that you might have, if you're in DACA, all of these things. If you're anywhere in that sphere of not 100% a citizen of this country, watch your back. Look for help, get legal help, get advice, seek out people that can love you, protect you, and guide you on this. It's very important. And there are people out there, even if you can't afford an attorney or legal help, there are organizations out there that can help you get the help that you need, and at the very least get advice. And if you're in a process or you're getting ready to apply for a process, make sure that you get help doing that so that you get it done right. I'm no lawyer, but this is an area that you do want to make sure that you have somebody that knows what's going on and all of the policy changes that are going to be coming around that, who can help you navigate those things. Very important, because they will be looking for any little snag, any little way that they can reject people, that they can deport people, that they can stop the process, gum it up, slow it up. It's going to be a hard time, and there's just no way around that. Ouch, I'm sorry. It just breaks my heart. So I'm sorry to end this video on this note, but that's all of the areas that we really need to look at. It's a scary time not only for people who aren't 100% a citizen, but it's a scary time for all of us who are not heteronormative white conservatives, because they're coming after, seems like, everybody who's not them, and it's just a sad thing. And the best thing we can do is to start right here by making sure that we've got ourselves protected. The next 9 episodes, we will be talking about happier things, but ways that we can educate, ways we can empower, ways that we can join in with other people to move the ball forward and push back on what's coming at us. But first here, it's about protecting ourselves and protecting against the coming storm. So that said, we have a full playlist that's going to have all of the 10 parts. That's going to be right there. There are links down below linking to many of the things that I talked about, including a link to our website written article, which goes into detail about all of these things. And then you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel right there. Either way, stay tuned.